Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to our Lyceum 2025. We've been doing this for a long time. It seems like 6 or 7 years. We've got a special program tonight presented by Ross Whittier, standing to my right. The program title is Ireland, the Emerald Isle. Everyone is familiar, as he writes, with Ireland, even if we haven't visited. But is Ireland really like all those things that seem so familiar? Come join us as we explore a bit of Ireland, and perhaps we will find some surprises along the way and be familiar with it. We will glimpse many famous areas along Ireland's west coast from Dingle to Clifden, including Slea Head, if I can pronounce it, Head, on the Dingle Peninsula. The Cliffs of Moher, the Burren, and the Connemara. A brief stay, and you will can correct me afterwards, all right? A brief stay in a castle, then off to Dublin before heading home. So Ross will present that. We're going to be off in July and August. Then in September, Dave Nelson has renamed his program to the program title being the USS Monitor. And his write-up says the technological innovation that changed the naval warfare. This is a history of the cheese box on a raft. Its many advanced technical features, its building, the Battle of Hampton Roads against the CSS Merrimack, saving the Union Navy from destruction, the human element of the men who sailed in her, and with the loss of the Monitor and the eventual discovery and rediscovery. That is August or September. In October, David Sears will be presenting a program on pondering the remote pond. Then in November, as we do every November, Carol Whittier has a program entitled History of Food, Part 3.
Yay!
And we always like that. And we have 3 positions already filled for 2026.
Wow.
And as we pick the dates, we'll present that electronically through email. So without further ado, Ross, please stand forward.
Excuse me, okay. We're going to talk a bit about Ireland, and we're going to focus on the west coast mostly. So let's get started. This is the Emerald Isle, and Ireland actually is a very old place, but a very young country. We saw places that were 5,000 to 6,000 years old, but the Republic of Ireland was only declared a republic in 1949. Now, Carl mentioned in my write-up about the show that everybody seems to have an opinion about what Ireland's like, whether we've been there or not. So I suggest you think about how you think of Ireland. What is it you think about Ireland? And let's take a look and see whether any of these are what you were thinking about. Palm trees. Cranky Yankee corn dogs. And the parrot. Probably not generally what you were thinking about in Ireland. The trip we took is outlined in these Google Map shots. We started right here, actually, Shannon, near Limerick, and drove down to Dingle, and then went north to Dublin, Galway, Clifden, and that's the Connemara region. And then we went over to Cong and spent a little time, one night, in a real castle, and then we drove across to Dublin. This is our trip down to Dingle and the Dingle Peninsula. We arrived at Shannon at about 5:30 in the morning and rented a car. And there were a few challenges that first day out. Traveling on a road with a speed limit of 100 kilometers, that's about 62 miles an hour. And there is a sign painted on the road that says slow. A few hundred yards further down the road, there's another sign painted on the road that says, slower. We also discovered that painted center lines, when they are not there, when they disappear, it doesn't mean they ran out of paint. It means the road is no longer 2 lanes wide. And they don't want to mislead you into thinking you can pass that oncoming car. There's just not enough room. We also found that partly cloudy means partly rainy. And the cost of petrol or gasoline, actually we were buying diesel fuel, which was 4 to 10 cents cheaper at the time than gas. But we were paying about $8.06 on average a gallon. I checked that out in April of this year, that would have been $7.38. So it's still pretty expensive. Now, this is a Garmin GPS screen. You probably remember Garmin. And if you look carefully, you'll see that the speed limit's 100 kilometers. We were going 56, being rather conservative. That's about 35 miles an hour versus a 62 mile an hour speed limit. I'm going to show you a couple of real brief clips to give you an idea of why we were being conservative. You notice there's not a whole lot of room with that bus. And also, there's no road on your left. It's just brush, weeds. You can see the bus coming here. And you'll notice if you look carefully that we are actually not on the road anymore, a little bit off to the left. Fortunately, the road got a little wider there and I took advantage. One of the benefits of being in a rainy climate. This is a sign in Dingle on a storefront. This is Irish, or Gaelic if you will. And Dingle is a Gaeltacht, which is an Irish language word meaning an Irish-speaking region. In Dingle, all the locals speak Irish in their day-to-day business. They all speak perfectly good English and you have no problem getting along, but they are speaking to each other in Gaelic. Now, I want to note here that that was the last time I'm going to attempt to pronounce an Irish word. From now on, place names are my English interpretation of how they sound. This sign says Finn McCool's, the surfing company. At first we thought this was a joke because it's a surf company, but I looked it up, and Finn McCool was a mythical hunter warrior in Irish mythology, so a real guy, at least in their mythology. Dingle, like a lot of the towns we were in, excuse me, is very colorful. They often paint their buildings fairly bright colors, and the place was immaculately clean, which is also true of every other place we were in Ireland. There's no cigarette butts on the ground, no papers, it's perfectly clean. This is the harbor at Dingle, and it's a major fishing port. And they go out of here onto the Dingle Bay, which opens into the Atlantic Ocean. They also apparently like dolphins. And Dolly Parton. We don't know if she was there or if they just like her, but she has a star on the sidewalk in Dingle. All right, this is the Dunbeg Fort, and it says that it's 500 BC, but scientists now generally believe that it's actually 2,500 to 4,000 years old, and it's also known as a promontory fort. which is a fort built on a promontory that juts out, in this case, into the Dingle Bay. We initially assumed that they were protecting themselves from attack on the ocean, from the sea. But we will see in a moment that that was not very likely. What they were really doing was using the cliffs behind them to back themselves up, or protect their backs, while they were protecting themselves from landside attacks. Since we were there, major parts of this fort have fallen into the sea. And the Irish government is spending a lot of time and effort trying to figure out how to protect the rest of it. You can see it in this area in here, how rough the ground is. That was apparently part of the construction of the fort, because the rest of the land around this area was perfectly level. But that would obviously make it more difficult for attackers. And this is why they weren't too worried about attacks from the ocean. And on the other side, you can see it would be at best dangerous and probably not very successful. This is called a beehive hut. And this large one was originally in the center of the fort, and there were several smaller ones around it. It was just a shelter, I believe. And this is one of the smaller ones that's collapsed. I thought he looked a little indignant at us taking his picture, but also the road we're on here is the Slea Head road. It goes around the Dingle Peninsula. It's called Slea Head. And I found this on their website, which you may find interesting. It says, when driving Slea Head, please note that this is a one-way system for visitors based on the clockwise direction. Most important, this road is a two-way for local residents only. So, and I'll show you in a minute why they're a little concerned. That's the Slea Head Road. It's not, that's a parking area, so it's really not full as wide as the pavement. And that's a bus, and that's about as wide as the road. So we didn't spend a lot of time thinking about this, but we wondered what locals would do when they were going the other way. And this is, I think a lot of the roads in Ireland, in tourist areas, they strongly recommend that you go in a clockwise direction so you're never passing a bus. We saw beaches in a number of areas we visited, and we never saw anybody in the water. Now, it was mid-September and it was chilly, but I suspect the water was not all that warm either. People did walk these beaches, but we never did see anybody swimming. This is how they brand their sheep. They put a colored stripe down their back. There's housing, people's homes are very few and far between. It's very rural, but occasionally you do come across what appears to be a pretty nice home. Any of you who've been to my presentations, you know I like flowers. And these flowers were all growing wild beside the road. The Blasket Islands, there's 6 islands in the Blasket group. This is Great Blasket Island. It's off the west coast of Ireland, off the Dingle Peninsula. And the inhabitants, until 1953, it was inhabited until 1953 by strictly Irish-speaking people. When their population had dwindled to the point where they could no longer support themselves, the Irish government evacuated them to the mainland on November 17, 1953. Interesting and curiously enough, a lot of them ended up settling in Springfield, Massachusetts. Some former residents do still live in the Dingle Peninsula. this is the skeleton of the boats they would have used to get between the island and the mainland. Believe me, it can get very rough out there, so these were definitely intrepid sailors. You can see these farms were very far apart, so they did have community, but they didn't have much. They were very lonely, if you will. It was widely separated housing. I thought this was interesting because the ocean does carve out rocks pretty well. It's amazing what it can do. But if you notice that the sides of this are pretty straight, and it's got right angles at the top. And I wondered if maybe this was a man-made cavern in that rock. This is called the Gallerus Oratory. It's an ancient place of worship, and it dates from the 6th or 8th centuries. The construction is really interesting. All of those stones, every one of them is hand cut. And they all are slightly thinner at the outside than they are on the inside, so that they shed water better by tapering toward the outside of the wall. The only decay that really shows is in this capstone. It's beginning to depress. And they're not fancy. There was a door in the front and a window in the back. That was it. This is an abandoned church. As we go through Western Ireland, we're going to find a number of buildings that they're just there. I don't know what they ever were. There's never any signs around them. They're just abandoned buildings of all sorts of different shapes and sizes. And this was one of them. We thought it was kind of a pretty little church, but clearly abandoned. Okay, from Dingle, we headed up north. From Dingle, we headed up north. There's a high pass here, Connor Pass we went through, crossed the Shannon River on a ferry, and then drove north to Dublin. Dublin's an interesting place we'll talk about in a moment. We're going to travel to Dublin over the Connor Pass. And the Connor Pass is beneath the peak of Brandon Mountain, which is a 3,127 foot peak, the second highest one in Ireland. And this is what you see as you approach the top of the pass. And all of this out here, that's the Atlantic Ocean. All these little, one of the things that happens when it gets rainy all the time is you get waterfalls. And I thought that was kind of pretty, but I was also fascinated by the coloring on the rocks. We saw this in a lot of places there. Again, lots of territory and very few houses. And a very large number of sheep raising farms. That's our ferry, just coming into the port to pick us all up. It's fairly large actually. It held three cars abreast, and had some pretty good sized vehicles. There's a tractor trailer up front and an RV. And that's our chariot, little diesel Ford, a black one. And we're approaching a port on the other side. Note that the river has whitecaps on it. And this is a beautiful day, bright sun, unusual, but almost every day we were there was very windy. And I'll show you in a while some of the effects of that on the coast. Another of those abandoned buildings, nothing anywhere around it that would tell us what it was. It looked like it was in pretty good shape, actually. Now this is the Ashbrook Lodge. This is where we stayed when we were in Dublin. And I think there's an interesting story that I kind of like when we were here. When we were in Dingle, after we finished dinner at a restaurant there, we were looking at a menu in another restaurant to think about the next day, the next evening, and we struck up a conversation with a couple from England. And they said they came to Ireland quite often because they really liked Irish music and they liked Irish session music. Session music is very common, especially in Dublin. It's a kind of a mecca for session music. They play Irish music, but they're not named bands. Musicians just show up at the pubs and play music. And it happens all over Ireland, but especially Dublin is one of the major places. Every pub in Dublin has session music every night. That same couple, by the way, was at the Ashbrook Lodge the next morning at breakfast. And the reason I think that's interesting is because there's 3 bedrooms in the Ashbrook Lodge, and it's only one of probably hundreds of places to stay in Dublin. So to run into that couple from England seemed to be a bit of a high coincidence. This is the effect of the wind around Dublin on the coast. And it was like this a lot. It's not a rare event. That cliff that you can see up here is about 100 to 200 feet high. So you get an idea of the violence of that ocean wave. And there's another one. Has found a kind of an opening, and it's actually splashed up above the cliff. And these intrepid folks actually go out in this water in that boat like that. And you notice the way the bow is built to presumably help them with the waves. Now I believe you've heard of the Cliffs of Moher. This is the visitor center. And this little thing up here, that's actually a skylight. And it's all built into that hillside. These buildings down along here, they're all souvenir and gift shops. The Cliffs of Moher are located at the southwestern edge of the Burren region in County Clare, and we'll get to see the Burren in a little bit. They range from 390 feet at Hag's Head to over 700 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, which is their maximum height, just north of O'Brien's Tower, which is that tower there. The Cliffs of Moher receive more than 1 million visitors a year. Very popular spot. Now O'Brien, the tower was built in 1835 by a local landlord named Cornelius O'Brien as a viewing point for the tourists that, even then, flocked to the Cliffs of Moher. So it was his way of increasing his farmer's income, as a landlord's income. And some spectacular views from the top of that. Now these are the Cliffs of Moher, and when we talk about it, this is not just perspective here, this is the way it actually looks. And down here is Hag's Head, that's the 390 foot, and just around, whoops, not good. This area up here is the 700 foot height. That's pretty much the maximum height that the cliffs attain. I took this because to me that's a little more like what the ocean would do, not the straight sides and right angled corners. And we'll see there's amazing things the ocean really does. This is the Atlantic, and it's always this way. I was interested in this because, again, this block of rock has been carved out such that it makes it look like there's 4 of them. All the effects of the ocean over time. Instead of a fence, they put these huge slabs of rock up to keep you on the trail, on the walk. And I think this was a surprise, but this is probably why they did that. Now the barn, this is Kilfenora, and the white building on the right is the Burren Center, which is an information center about the Burren. The Burren actually is a karst landscape region of limestone, having little or no overcover. So in many areas it's just a limestone top. It's an area of about 200 square miles in the County Clare on the west coast, and we'll see some of that in a bit. But Kilfenora, the real attraction here is the Kilfenora Cathedral. It's a ancient stone cathedral built about 1189 on the site of a 6th century monastery. Its claim to fame comes from the Celtic high crosses that are in the cemetery behind it. You seldom see that many in one place. Here's one of the ones I thought was one of the nicer ones. And even inside the cathedral, there's Celtic crosses, and you can see that it's deteriorated considerably, but they're spending a lot of time and effort trying to keep it from deteriorating any further. Another one of those random buildings you pass and you say, wow, that's pretty neat. Don't know what it is, but it looks like it could well have been a grand estate once upon a time. Thought this was an interesting way to build a stone wall. You can see. And this is what the Burren looks like in most of its 200 square miles. Now this is a portal tomb at Poltnabrone. It's Poltnabrone Dolmen, and this dramatic site on the karst limestone pavement of the Burren is one of the most famous Irish dolmen. The dolmen is a stone tomb, also called a portal tomb or a wedge tomb. And the name Poltnabrone literally means the hole of the sorrows. Now there's the thin 12-foot capstone of this, and thin I think is a relative term, sits on two 6-foot high portal stones to create a chamber, and it's in a 30-foot low cairn or pile of stones, which a couple pictures later to get a better view of the whole thing. You can see the cairn there a little better. And that's what the cairn will look like. There are, the radiocarbon dating of human bones found in some of these portals, tombs, suggest that it was used more than 6,000 years ago. And there are about 70 of these tombs in this site. It strikes me as an interesting piece of construction feat.
How did they get those rocks up there?
I wondered too, but I found no evidence of how they did it. And if you think about it being 6,000 years ago, it's even more amazing. So leaving Dublin, we headed up to Galway, but we decided to make a detour down here to Gort, and we wanted to see a castle there called Thor Ballallee. The castle was fortified and built in the 13th century. It's a Norman tower, and W.B. Yeats had a summer home there. That summer home, before we get there, I'll show you the Burren. This is the Burren. Now you don't see any limestone, because in some places it's very well vegetated. There's enough overcover to grow grass and trees and whatever. And if you look carefully, you can see this vehicle down here. We're going to be down there in a few minutes on that same road. Now this is more like what the majority of the barn looks like, and this is sort of what makes it famous. Just limestone that's not covered by any kind of earth. Now this is Store Valley. This was restored. We were not able to get into it because it was restored in 1965 on the 100th anniversary of Yates, but it was severely damaged by flood in 2009. And at the time we were there, it appeared that there was no money and no real inclination to redo it. Now, I checked that recently, and apparently they have now, in fact, renovated it and reopened it to the public. Okay. This is where Yates made his summer home. And it's, like I say, it's an Anglo-Norman tower that was built by the Burke family near the town of Gort, which is in County Galway. And it was also known as Yates Tower because he was the poet. William Butler Yeats lived there in the summers. This is our hotel in Galway, the Merrick. We didn't spend a whole lot of time here, however, we traveled on. We travel around a lot every day. This is a shopping area in Galway. It's no traffic. Again, very clean, very interesting city. The tribes of the tribes of Galway were 14 merchant families who dominated the political, commercial, and social life of the city of Galway between the mid-13th and late 19th centuries. These families suffered under Cromwell, who labeled them tribes, which the families adopted as an act of defiance. So Galway was pretty much run by these 14 families for centuries. This is the Collegiate Church of St. Nicholas, and it's the largest medieval parish church in Ireland in continuous use as a place of worship since its founding in 1320. You can see here a couple of arches. It's called the Spanish Arch. It's located on the banks of the River Carib, directly across from Claddagh. It is an extension of the original city wall, which was built in 1584. And the Spanish arches were built in the 1700s to give access to the docks where ships from Spain tied up. Now, I mentioned Claddagh was across the river. The Claddagh ring is a traditional Irish ring given as token of friendship or love, or an engagement ring, a wedding ring. The design and customs associated with it originated in the Irish fishing village of Claddagh, just outside of Galway. The ring as we know it was first produced in the 17th century. Now, we were planning a trip to the Aran Islands. There are 3 Aran Islands. We were headed for Inishmore, which is the largest of the 3. And we got to the dock, we thought, that's going to be a long trip. Fortunately, we thought, maybe it won't be so bad. However, as we set out, the wind was violent, and so was once we got out of the harbor, you couldn't stand up, you couldn't sit down, it was terrible. And this looked a little better. This is our port, and we thought, okay, this is good, dry land. And then it dawned on us we had to go back. As I mentioned, we're going to look at the Inishmore a little bit. It's very rural. A lot of sheep being raised here. very scattered out. They have a couple of communities, but people live pretty scattered. And a lot of it, like this, maybe a barn and or a house or something, but not much. And they have these little lanes, as you can see here. Now, that's a pretty narrow lane. This is out looking out the front window, the windshield of our bus. That's a cart being pulled by a donkey, and that's a truck. And they're facing each other with a van of some sort behind that truck. And that truck fills up pretty much the whole road, unless you're very good at driving in the brush on the side of the road. And this is out of the side window of our bus, and you can see we have maybe 6 inches between us and that cart. And that's us going by the truck. And this is very slow and very deliberate. And so traveling around Inishmore can take a bit of time. The swans, on the other hand, can go anywhere they want. They have water room. This is called Dun Angus, and it's a fort, and it's the most famous of several prehistoric forts on the Aran Islands. It is at the edge of a 300-foot cliff, and it's not known when it was built, though it is now thought to date from the Iron Age, so perhaps 3,000 years old. I did not take this picture, I just wanted you to have you could see the layout of it, how it nestled against the cliff side. It's an Irish food truck. And we had to walk to the top. To see the fort, we had to walk up here to the top of this hill, and the trail kind of wanders around, and we thought, well, it's not too bad. Look at it, it's well paved. It's not really paved with stone. That shouldn't be too much of a problem, except most of it was like this. We did make it to the top, and had a pretty good view of the fort at the top. And this is the way one side, the west side of Inishmore looks. It's just all rock. There were a couple of villages, and this is one of them. Also, if you've been looking around at these, you know, there's stone walls everywhere. And you can see them all here. And I guess if you have stone, you make stone walls, you know, to get a clear wall somehow.
They also used them to cut the wind.
Cut the wind?
Yeah,
that's a good point.
That's what I was told.
Yeah. This is the way a lot of the places looked that we saw on Inishmore. A lot of thatched roof barns and occasionally a fairly modern looking house. It's an abandoned house. These are not sheep, these are goats. And those bushes that they're feeding on are brambles with long, sharp thorns, which apparently the goats don't mind at all. Because they move these goats around the island to keep these brambles under control. We saw beaches, and you can see the people walking on the beach. We didn't see anybody swimming here either. Now it's mid-September, and you can tell it's chilly because we're both wearing sweaters and a windbreaker. But this turned out to be a really lovely day, windy and sunny. Typical of a lot of the days we saw that. So from Galway, by the way, these are the 3 Aran Islands, and this is Inishmore. So we went from Galway up to Clifden and Linane, and this area here is what is called the Connemara. Really beautiful area of Ireland. This is Clifden, a nice city, a little bit bigger than Dingle and Dublin, but not overly large, very comfortable. We walked around it one day, and this building here had a jewelry store in it, and we thought we'd look for something for someone back home, and so we went in, and we got to talking with the owner, who was a silversmith, and his wife, and we did buy something. And now at the end of every November or early December, we get an email from them telling us all about their family's adventures for the past year and a catalog. And we've since bought a couple of things from them. They're really terrific people. This is the Abbey Glen Castle. This is not the big authentic castle I'm talking about earlier. We'll get to that. But we stayed at this for a couple of days. Very nice place, but didn't seem like a castle to me. Beautiful grounds. This land slopes down toward those trees, and just past those trees is a road which you can take a walk down to Clifden, which we did one day. And this is our parrot. This is an interesting parrot. People that walk by this parrot and talk to him, he didn't do anything, just silent. Donna walked up to him and talked to him, and they carried on a conversation. I don't know if she knows what they were talking about or not, but I don't. Flowers. It's the middle part of September. Again, most things have gone by, but the grounds on this place were really well laid out. Another one of those abandoned buildings, just stick up anywhere. It's a castle. And the road we're on is called Sky Road because it's way above the surrounding valley and the fjord, or not the fjord, but the inlet from the Atlantic Ocean. And this is a fish farm, fairly common in this area. You can see it's quite an interesting coastline. And this is Connemara National Park. It was founded and opened to the public in 1980, so it's recent. Much of the land was once part of Culmore Abbey, the Culmore Abbey estate, which we'll get to in just a moment. The park is dominated by Diamond Hill, which is 1,312 feet high, and there are a lot of carnivorous plants in this park because it turns out it's a lot of bog, and bogs have very little nutrient, and so these plants get their energy by digesting insects. Diamond Hill. Waterfalls throughout this park, really pretty. Some of the lush plant life there. And this is Culmore Abbey. Culmore Abbey was originally built as Culmore Castle. And it was built as a private home in 1867 by a wealthy London doctor. It covers approximately 40,000 square feet and has over 70 rooms. It was sold in 1909, and then in 1920, the Irish Benedictine nuns in 1920 purchased the abbey and land after they were forced to flee Ypres, Belgium during World War I. The nuns ran an international boarding school as a day school for local girls until they were forced to close the school in 2010. And I could not find anything about why they were forced to close it. But the Benedictine nuns continue to run the abbey, and they continue to do various educational courses and other events at the abbey. So there's a little bit closer. Pretty nice building for a doctor. And the inside is opulent. Just a couple of pictures of some of what I thought were the nicer areas of the abbey. The walled garden. Originally, this was built at the time of the construction of the castle. it fell into serious disrepair after the 1909 sale of the estate, and the Benedictine nuns began restoration in 1996, and the gardens were reopened in 1999. It covers about 6 acres, and I'll just slowly go through some of the slides so you can get an impression of what a lovely place this is. You can imagine the amount of maintenance this garden takes. They do raise vegetables here, and they use it in their functions and in their daily living. And as we leave the gardens, we see the lake that's in front of the Abbey. Yeah, in front of the Abbey, Connemara Abbey. Nice spot. Now you no doubt are familiar with peat and the fact that it's used for heating and cooking, and still is in some parts of Ireland. This is a peat bog. And this is peat that's been cut and is out here to dry. And here, this is dried peat, and they cover it with these plastic tarps. And in front of it, you can see these are all piles of cut peat. Artillery cruises. We took a cruise on Ireland's only fjord. It's 9 miles long, and aquaculture is very common. This is the catamaran we had our lunch on as we sailed the fjord. And these are some crazy people doing rock climbing. Some experts debated whether this was really a fjord. They said the walls were just not steep enough. But after years of doing underwater surveys, they realized that the walls beneath the water are virtually vertical. And they've all decided that it really is a fjord. Anybody want to guess what those are? Well, this is a mussel farm. And it's a very large mussel farm. This is the boat that they use to pull those barrels and to harvest the mussels. And apparently mussels are very popular. I guess they do export some, I'm not sure of the detail of that. Okay, so having finished up in Clifden, we came over here to Cong, where we stayed at a castle, a really nice castle. There's no mistaking this for a castle. This is the entrance to the castle. Behind us, in this, what would be behind us in this picture, there's a large pair of iron gates, which are locked. And as you approach the gate, there's a guard. And you have to show that you have a reservation in order for him to open the gate so you can get to this point and ultimately to the castle. The castle was built on this site in 1228, and there was expanded several times, not the castle but the grounds, until 1852 when it extended to 26,000 acres. And that's pretty much what's here today. Now the castle is so large, I couldn't get back far enough to take a picture of it, so I took 3 pictures of it. That's a castle. At least I think that's a castle. The grounds like this are immaculate and amazingly kept. And this is a private entrance that seems to be fairly well guarded. And you look out onto the lake that the castle fronts on. It was actually quite a big lake, but we didn't see any kind of activity on it. Inside was just opulent, all sorts of wood paneling. Now this particular room had a lot of had wallpaper on it. And you can see this really incredible chandelier. But many of the rooms didn't have any wallpaper, they were entirely wood paneled. I like this room because I really like the color of the rug. And this, all the rooms on the first floor, this is the ceiling in those rooms. You get an idea of the amount of work that went into building this. All right, falconry, you've heard of falconry. Falconry is hunting for wild quarry in its natural state and habitat by means of trained birds of prey. When you take a hawk out, as we got to do, it's called flying a hawk. We flew Harris hawks. Unlike most hawks, they quite readily accept new handlers, so they're relatively easy to handle from one person to another. And they are also the only hawks that hunt in packs in their native habitat. It's hard to get a hawk to sit still for a picture, so these are a little blurry, but that's our Harris hawk. And if you look at the bottom of the picture, I'm wearing a very heavy leather glove, and he's landed on the back of my thumb and my wrist. And when these things fly in and hit your arm, because between your thumb and finger, you have a piece of meat, and that's why they come back. And they come swooping in and they come down almost to ground level and pop right up and land on your arm. And they can't get through the glove, it's too heavy, but you can feel the power in those talons when they land on you. And the bird itself doesn't weigh much, but they really strike hard. It was really an interesting day. Now there's nothing that brings these hawks back. They're trained, but they can fly away anytime they want. And there was a course that was tree lined, and they would fly down. This hawk would fly down, and then at some point he decided to come back for his meat, and he'd turn around and come back, and then come swooping in on your arm. At one point, he disappeared into the woods, and it was fascinating watching him because for a while, until he got deep into the woods, we could see him dodging branches and things and flying at very high speed. Fascinating. And the handler took off after him, and after a few minutes he brought him back. And he told us that the odds were pretty good that the hawk saw a rodent, you know, a mole or a rat or something, and decided it wanted it, so it went after it. And he never told us how he managed to get the hawk to land on his arm, but he brought him back. The most interesting day. Following our night at the castle, the room we had, by the way, in this castle, the bedroom we had in this castle, was big enough to be a one-bedroom apartment. It was immense. So we then went across Ireland to Dublin. We went to the airport, dropped off our rental car, and got a taxi into Dublin. Our hotel was in a neighborhood. It just doesn't look like a hotel, it's just another building. It's called a Marion, and it's plain on the outside, but they had a really beautiful planting inside our countryside in the inside. And I think this statue here is Oscar Wilde. Guinness. Everybody knows Guinness. It's probably the most well-known product of Ireland. Part of the Guinness brewery is the storehouse, what they call a storehouse, and it's a tourist area. They have events there, and they'll show you. You can have a glass of their Guinness and the like. In fact, the Guinness, the brewery is at St. James Gate and it's brewed, all of Guinness is brewed, not all of Guinness is brewed there. It's brewed in 7 countries around the world. They claim to have about 10 million pints served daily, and they make 3 million pints daily in Dublin. They also told us that around the world, in each country, use the same recipe, but they tweak it just slightly, so that it's a little more what's common to the local taste. Arthur Guinness started his brewery in 1759. Now, ready for this? With a 9,000 year lease. At a cost, on a 4-acre plot, at a cost of 45 British pounds per year, which in today's dollars would be about $61 a year. Also, Dawn and I took a class on how to pour a Guinness, and we are now certified in pouring a Guinness. This is what a section of the brewery, it covers most, this is what covers most of the 4-acre plot. One of the world's most famous breweries. All right, Dublin is unusual. It has 2 cathedrals. This is the Christ Church Cathedral, and there's also St. Patrick's Cathedral. They are Church of Ireland churches, which is Anglican, but different from the Church of England. And it's second in size to the Irish Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church. And there's a church called St. Werburgh's, which we'll see in a moment, which is also a Church of Ireland church. And that was built in 1178 and rebuilt in 1300 after a fire destroyed the first one. And that's Church of Christ Cathedral. This is St. Patrick's Cathedral. They were having a function there, and this is as close as we could get to it. We weren't allowed in. But they had a really beautiful side yard. And St. Werburgh's doesn't look like much on the outside, but inside it's really quite lovely. Kilmainham, Yale, or jail. It says it was 1787. The information I found when I looked it up was that it was built in 1796. So it's possible that that's when they broke ground for it. And that's the jail. It was decommissioned in 1924, and it was restored by volunteers in the 1960s and became an Irish Nationalist Museum. And you can see how big it is, and yet the cells were not very big. And they had a single window at the very top of the wall. I thought this cell was interesting because that artwork was done by an inmate of this cell. Trinity College was founded in 1592 under the orders of Queen Elizabeth. And it's a lovely campus, typical of a lot of European campuses. Now the Book of Kells, many of you may have heard of the Book of Kells. It's kept at the Trinity College Library. It's an illuminated manuscript in Latin containing the 4 Gospels of the New Testament. It was created by Celtic monks about 800 or slightly earlier. And it's a masterwork of calligraphy and represents the pinnacle of illumination. It is also widely regarded as Ireland's finest natural treasure. Now the next 3 pictures I'm going to show you are not. I did not take them. Admission to the library closed at 5 p.m. Donna and I got there at 5:05. But I did want you to see the incredible work of illumination in this book. Check out the detail that's in that, and it gets more incredible as I go on. Now this was around 800, so these monks were obviously extraordinarily skilled. Okay, just a quick trip and some of the streets of Dublin we thought were interesting. This is Irish fish and chips, claiming to be Dublin's oldest chipper. This says no junk mail. We wondered if we could do that at home, but decided we couldn't get away with it. That's the Queen of Tarts. And of course, Jameson is another famous alcohol and produced in Dublin. We got a chance to sample that. It's very good. There's an interesting backstory to this pub. When we were at the Guinness storehouse, they have people that roam around answering questions, telling you what you answering your questions, talking with you, whatever you want to do. And we got talking with one of the gentlemen there, and we got talking about American beer and how it compared to Irish beer. And I told him what my favorite American beer was at the time. And he said, "Oh, wow, that's a really good beer. I drink that all the time." He said, "And if you go to this pub and ask for a pint, they'll pour you a pint, no question." So we did. Pubs, the official sunblock of Ireland. That's from Finnegan's Irish Amber, as Irish as it gets. This is Oscar Wilde, a statue of Oscar Wilde. He was born in Dublin, spent most of his life in England and France, had a really controversial career. A lot of neighborhoods in Dublin, the buildings have unique and brightly colored doors. So we threw a few of them in. Now this is a doorman at a typical neighborhood hotel, and he's talking with the local. And we found Irish people to be just extraordinary. They were wonderful, friendly, warm, helpful. They'd even help you if you didn't necessarily ask for help. And I think I have a story that may illustrate this. After leaving Shannon Airport, remember I said we got there about 5:30 in the morning. It took a little while to rent a car. We had to drive around Limerick, so we had some traffic, and we're getting used to driving on the left side of the road. And we'd been on the road for a while, and we needed a rest stop. So we pulled into a gas station and convenience store complex, and went inside, and we're looking for the restroom. And this guy behind the counter says, "Right over there, lad," and pointed to the side. And sure enough, there were the restrooms. We hadn't asked a word. Anyway, that pretty much does it for our trip today. And we find Ireland to be a really, really great place, and I hope you enjoy some of it. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer. And
So why don't we give Ross a little bit of applause, and then we'll go through questions.
I don't think there's any Guinness out here tonight, but there's probably some tasty goodies.
So how long was your trip, Ross? What was the length of time?
I think it was about 15 days.
How many miles do you think you drove?
I didn't,
Don't know?
didn't take note of that.
Okay.
It is, as you could see, it was almost entirely on the west coast except for the Iron. In Dublin, one of the things we thought was interesting, when we was on a road around Dublin going to the airport. It was like our superhighways, multi-lane divided highway, and it was a toll road, and they were using the transponders like we have on the Mass Pike now. Now this was in 2012, before we ever even heard of the things. They were already doing stuff like that with the technology, but we did not measure the mileage.
What time of year was it?
It was mid-September. I think, I don't remember the exact dates, but we started like the first week of September and went for a little over 2 weeks. And it was chilly most days. Although you saw the palm trees on the west coast, the winters are quite mild because of the Gulf Stream cuts across the Atlantic and runs up the west coast of Ireland. It keeps them from getting excessively cold. Anyone else? Well, go have yourselves a tasty
If not,
snack.
what we'll do is, those who are able, if you could help us stack the chairs, those who would like to start with refreshments, go ahead and do that. Thank you. We'll see you in September.